Do you think we can ever know all there is to be known about a single day that happened 100 years ago?
I can write a story about it. I can't say that I can write the story about it. I can't say how this story really got garbled or mistold. No one can unscramble that egg. I can make a reasonable guess how this apocryphal story gained a foothold, and I can do an awful lot of telling of the story that's verifiable about Bill, which I consider really compelling and kind of heartbreaking.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Community Foundation in support of the Adirondack Community Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
When was it that devices had to start making some kind of announcement that they were turning on or turning off? Because my washing machine at home plays a jaunty little tune when you turn it on. Unless, so that moving the cover open or closed actually interrupts the jaunty little tune that it plays.
We had was it a washer or a dryer? I think it was a washer. At one of the last houses that we lived in, the last house before this one. You could play the melody to Stand By Me. And it was really annoying to people.
Like Benny King, Stand By Me.
Benny King, Stand By Me, yeah. Just by pushing different buttons on it.
I
don't think that was intentional, but I figured it out.
I thought maybe it was like standby mode.
The classic Stephen King story about technology gone awry. Standby mode.
There was a point when washers and dryers, when they were done, would make the following noise.
Which, I didn't dislike.
It got the message across,
It cut through the television or the stereo, yeah.
And, our washing machine, because we bought a new washer at some point, but our dryer is still the one that was in the house when we moved in.
Yeah.
And we just shut the alarm off on that because, okay, they're dry. They're not going to get any more dry. But the washing machine plays a different jaunty tune than it plays when you turn it on. And I never in a million years hear it, but my dogs hear it.
So the dogs, despite not having opposable thumbs,
right,
are really helpful in the laundry process.
They get the message across, although they also bark at the UPS guy or the random schmoes walking down the street or really anything. So it's hard to necessarily isolate whether they're barking at the laundry being done or something else.
I was just having a conversation with our Northern Light co-host, Monica Sandreski, about the voices that we give our animals. We've had this conversation before, I think,
yes,
right?
Well, I'm sure we have, because one of my dogs has a very distinctive voice, and the other we still haven't figured out, and he's almost 3.
What have you tried on for him?
And I'm sure we've talked about this on this show before. Maybe we have. But we have a 5-year-old schnoodle.
Yeah.
Which is a combination poodle and schnauzer, although she is about 98% schnauzer. The only part of her that is really poodle is her tiny little feet.
They're adorable.
They are adorable. But other than that, she would be anyway. But she has the voice of a very high-pitched voiced elderly man who was a veteran of the partisans who fought in northern Italy against the Nazi oppressors.
And that sounds like...
It sounded like this. This reminded me of a time I went. Anyway, so that's her. Her name is Muesli, and her little brother, who is actually much larger than her, is a 35-pound cockapoo named Linus, a Cocker Spaniel Poodle mix, and he's big and a little dopey. And we just haven't found the right voice. You could talk like this, but but for some reason that voice never stuck.
Oh, okay. Well, he's going to be around a while. You'll figure
Yeah.
it out. For our cat, Ripley, it kind of varies. It depends upon our mood, really. Sometimes it's just the voices that we use, which is like, gee, boss, I don't know about that. That seems pretty suspect. And sometimes she talks like this. Oh, my geez, I don't know. But we haven't quite figured it out either. And we've had her for 4 years, I think. 4.5 years we've had her. The important thing is that you must do a voice for your pet. Even if it's variable, even if it changes depending upon your mood, because otherwise, what are you doing?
Well, right. How's the dog or cat or fish or whatever communicating? We had a goldfish in my house growing up named Garfield.
Okay, good name. Assuming because of the cat.
Yes,
color
yes,
scheme,
and the fact that we fed him lasagna.
And your whole house big fans of James Garfield.
Yes, right, exactly. And he lived to be, I think, 15 years old. And
Did your parents just keep replacing him without telling you?
No, because actually he existed well into my college years.
Really?
And my mom kept him in a non-aerated bowl on the kitchen counter, and we were convinced that he lived that long. And we really don't know what gender this goldfish was, but
For the purposes of our story, it's fine that he's
we're
a
going to
he.
call him a him. Anyway, we are convinced he lived that long because he was adjacent to the microwave oven.
It was just blasting him with radiation.
Yeah, exactly. And
Every time he was on his deathbed, someone would microwave a bowl of popcorn. And he'd
exactly,
just be right back
and
to life.
he communicated with people too. This was a fish that my mom regularly talked to, and I think the rest of us talked to him when we were in the room as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he would blow bubbles at us.
Which is a nice segue into today's conversation about hockey.
Yes, yes,
Because there's frozen fish on a lot of hockey ponds.
right, frozen or under a lot of
Well,
hockey
that's what
ponds.
I meant, yeah.
Well, and in Detroit, when the Red Wings make the playoffs, they people in the crowd throw an octopus on the ice.
That's not true. Is that
This
true?
is absolutely true.
That's terrifying.
Well, the idea was originally when they did this that it took, and I think this is the story, that it took 8 wins to win the Stanley Cup. You had to win 4 games in the first round of the playoffs and then 4 games in the Stanley Cup. And now it actually requires like 17 octopi because actually I think the word is actually octopuses because it is not a it's not a Latin word.
okay.
You don't. Anyway.
I don't know.
I once interviewed an octopus scientist who corrected me very politely that it is not octopi. Anyway, but the idea was that the 8 arms or the eight tentacles or whatever they are
signifies one of the wins, each one of the wins.
Yeah, exactly. And if memory serves, there are very strict rules. If and when the Red Wings make the playoffs, they've been very adamant about people not bringing octopuses to the stadium anymore, and of course people still do.
Presumably they're no longer living.
Correct. I think that's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Be a much
Presumably, or if they are, they're not living for very long.
I was going to say it'd be a much weirder tradition if they're throwing a live octopus on the ice rink and it just skitters between the players. Ugh, I hate octopuses.
You hate octopuses.
They freak me out, man.
Do you hate squid as well?
Yeah, they're freaky. What are they doing down there?
Jellyfish?
Well, yeah, of course, they're freaky too.
They're just kind of like a big ball of snot.
Yeah, but they're freaky. Come on.
And the ink?
That's freaky
You're a
too.
writer. You should appreciate the ink.
No, I don't. I don't like that. They're Lovecraftian monsters, and I don't want them near me. They freak me out.
Well, this connects to our topic today, which is hockey.
We got there.
We got there eventually. But I followed hockey for a long time. I grew up as a Boston Bruins fan, and I lost interest in the Bruins about the time in the 90s when they seemed to lose interest in winning. And then I moved up here in the mid 90s for my first stint at North Country Public Radio. And it was the time when the Ottawa Senators were first getting good and trying to make the playoffs for the first time in their history. with a little asterisk, and we'll get back to that asterisk in just a moment. And I haven't given up the Senators since, even though I moved away from the North Country in '98. I have followed the Senators for the rest of my life so far. And we used to go to, when we lived in Arizona, we would go see the Senators play the Coyotes when the Coyotes still existed. And my sister-in-law in Minnesota would save one of her season tickets when the Senators would play the Minnesota Wild, and I would go and watch a game with her. And for a long time, the Senators would always win, and I'd be the one in the Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, going, "Yay!" whenever the Senators scored, and all the Minnesotans around me would go, "Oh, stop that!" And then for the next few games, the Wild would win, and I would shrink down in my seat wearing my 5 layers of Senators crap. Anyway, the asterisk you were wondering about.
I was.
The asterisk is because the Senators actually were good in the very early part of the 20th century.
Okay.
One of the original NHL teams was the original version of the Ottawa Senators, and to this day, if you go to a Senators game in Ottawa at the Canadian Tire Center, or CTC for those of us in the know, there are Stanley Cup banners because they won the Stanley Cup in 1920 and 1921 and 1922. And
when you say they were one of the best, I mean, if there's only 4 teams, then how horrible can you be?
Right.
I'm the 4th best hockey team. How many are there?
Ethan, I think of you as the 4th best hockey team.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. What a nice Christmas gift you just gave me.
Yeah. What were we talking about? Hockey, right. Anyway, so this interview today with writer Gare Joyce. He's a reporter for the Kingston Whig-Standard, and that is WHIG.
Right.
As opposed to the regular kind of toupee that we wear.
Have you ever tried a toupee?
I have not.
Me neither.
But it would be the standard wig.
Let's keep it going.
Oh, come on. No drum roll or no rim shot.
No, I'm tired.
All right, fine. Anyway, Gare Joyce is a writer for the Kingston Whig-Standard, also a longtime sports writer before that. And he discovered a really interesting story of a guy from Kingston who, if you look back in certain corners of the internet, especially HockeyDB, Hockey Database, he shows up as having played one single game for the legendary Montreal Canadiens in the 1925-26 season. So almost exactly 100 years ago. The game supposedly happened, or the game itself happened in November of 1925. And he got to wondering about this guy named Bill Taugher, Taugher.
Right. And there was some question as to whether or not he definitively played in the game, right?
Right. So as we'll hear in this interview, what started out as a fairly straightforward story of, wow, how did this guy get to play his one and only NHL game as a 19-year-old for the Montreal Canadiens, the story turned into, did it actually happen, and what was the real story about Bill Taugher's hockey career? And it's a fascinating story. It turned out to be a 3-part, very extensive series in the Kingston Whig-Standard, which we'll have a link to from ncpr.org/northwards. But let's hear more about it. Gare Joyce, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Long-time listener, first-time interviewee.
How did Bill Taugher's story first come onto your radar?
I kind of spell it out in part 1. It was completely by accident. One of the first people that I met when I moved to Kingston was an electrician musician named Josh Taugher, and he told me that his great-grandfather played hockey, was a goaltender. And he was quickly corrected and told that he wasn't just a goaltender. He replaced George Vezina in the Montreal Canadiens net. I looked it up on my phone and saw that it was listed under HockeyDB that he in fact played one game for the Montreal Canadiens back in 1925-26. And off I went down the rabbit hole.
And a pretty substantial rabbit hole it was. I mean, so this was a guy who was well respected enough to be in the Kingston area Sports Hall of Fame. But what was it about that one game on his apparent resume that made that part of it so interesting to you?
Well, I just thought I'll write this story as a reconstruction of that one game. And it turned out that it wasn't a verifiable appearance. And it was subject of some dispute in the community of hockey historians. And there is a community of hockey historians. Like baseball has SABR, the Society of American Baseball Research. There is an outfit called the Society of International Hockey Research, SEER. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same way. But SEER does not recognize Tar's one game with the Canadians. It appears in some record books because it appeared in a seminal, probably the original hockey reference book, Trail to the Stanley Cup.
And this came out in what, like 1974, right?
67
Oh, right.
was Coleman, and then the Hockey Encyclopedia, which kind of cribbed Charles Coleman's work, that came out in 74. So years after the fact, and Charles Coleman was an amateur historian. He was, in fact, an engineer and a mayor of a small town in Quebec who, as a hobbyist, collected stats and hockey lore. And for some reason, he listed Taugher, not Bill necessarily. He just listed a surname in the Canadiens lineup back in the 1925-26 season when Bill, my buddy's great-grandfather, was working for his father in a blacksmith shop in Kingston and playing for a junior team here. Exactly how he would have ended up in the Canadiens net at that time, no one can explain, and no one can explain why, and no one can explain how, and all people can do is throw shade on the story. The closer you look at it, the more suspect it becomes. Without being able to say he never did it, because you assume that Charles Coleman in Trail to the Stanley Cup was basing it on something, but I wasn't able to figure out how this came to be. But I did come up with, I think, a pretty compelling theory and a bit of lost history of how this story got garbled over the years, at least in the city of Kingston. This telling that Bill replaced George Vezina in the Montreal Canadiens net in the 20s. I found that for a time, Bill, near the end of his career, was property of the Montreal Maroons and actually went to their training camp. And that comes out in part three of the story, sort of the professional career.
For people who don't know, there were actually two NHL teams in Montreal back in those days. The NHL, we think of the original six, but before the original six, there were actually an original seven, and then eventually a less original 10.
Yes, exactly. And so the Canadians were the Francophone team, and the Wanderers and later the Maroons were the Anglo team. And actually, in the 20s, that season, the 1925-26, when Bill was supposed to have played for the Canadians, the Maroons won the Stanley Cup that year. And when he became property of them, they had won the Stanley Cup for the second time in their history. And they ceased to be a going concern when their arena burned down in the 30s. But for a good long stretch in the 20s, the Canadians they didn't just share the Montreal market, they were kind of eclipsed in the Montreal market by the Maroons for a good stretch. And the Maroons were kind of like the Yankees. They spent freely, and they recruited with cold blood. They went after the biggest names and most expensive players in the game. So Bill thought he had landed his great shot at playing in the NHL 10 years after he was supposed to have played for the Canadiens.
Well, and we're sort of jumping around in time here, but to our knowledge, Bill was not the source of the rumor that he replaced George Vezina in net for the Canadiens. Your reporting leads one to believe that it was really just the story of him potentially playing for the Maroons that was told and retold until it ended up as the story that ends up in Hockey DB.
Exactly. So during Bill's life, he was interviewed a couple of times. One, when he played a great long stretch, his best hockey, his prime, he spent with Buffalo in a professional league. They're kind of like the forerunner of the American Hockey League, which has teams in Syracuse and Rochester and Buffalo and over the years. And Bill was playing in Buffalo back in 1930, and the one story that I found, he was talking about how much he worshipped George Vezina and other Canadians goalies. This was supposed to be 4 years after he played for the Canadians, but it didn't come up in the story or in the conversation. You'd think it would be a shoe that would drop at some point. And even Bill died in his mid 30s. He died in 1943. And his playing for the Canadians didn't come up then. You think as he was celebrated as a goaltender, but somehow they failed to mention that he played for the Montreal Canadiens. It just doesn't sit. You can't say it didn't happen, but you would just presume that it would come up at some point. And it really didn't seem to come up until Charles Coleman published his book in 1967, 40 years after the fact, decades after Bill's death.
You really wonder where Charles Coleman got a hold of this supposed footnote.
Charles Coleman is the mystery man in all of this, and that when I say that he published a seminal reference book, and you can go online and you'll see that copies of the original text sell for $1,000. Like there was only 1,000 copies printed. It was self-publishing, although he ended up getting some underwriting from the National Hockey League to do it, only because he was good friends with John Bassett, who sat on the Board of Governors of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He goaded the National Hockey League into helping underwrite the publication of this book. But it was, I don't want to say it was the Rosetta Stone or something like that, but it was the original text that people worked from when it came to hockey history as it would be written over the years. And I went for the purposes of my story to people who had access to the actual game reports that were filed with the league back in the 1920s. And as much as you think that it was ancient times, early era, that it wasn't very sophisticated, well, everyone had to file their contracts with the league, and everyone had to file game sheets with the league, all for insurance purposes and various other business purposes. Like there was a paper trail, and there's no finding Bill in this paper trail. And a couple of people that I know quite well, they had worked for the league and for sports record keepers, the Elias Sports Bureau. They'd handled the actual documents. They would have noticed that this name out of the blue appears on it. You just presume it would be, a huge news story if a 19-year-old blacksmith's son from Kingston stepped in to fill the void left by a goaltender who plays his last game and is only a few months away from death. The high drama, the stakes, everything. You would presume this would be instant legend rather than some little story that surfaced 40 years after the fact, previously unnoted.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just to give a little bit more color to it, I mean George Vezina, legendary goalie, and as you say, he was approaching death. He was playing with tuberculosis at this point.
The Shakutami cucumber. I can't even spit it out. The Shakutami cucumber. He played the first period against Pittsburgh. Imagine, you think about ancient history that the Pittsburgh Pirates were an NHL team that year, and could go no farther. When I started turning over rocks on this story, I just assumed that for whatever reason, a call was put out looking for a goaltender to fill this place. Well, the Canadians actually had someone in reserve, a former U.S. Olympic goaltender, played for the U.S. team at the 1924 Olympics, although a very French name, Al Lacroix, that he was able to come in. He was paid to be a reserve goaltender.
This is
They
the emergency backup goalie of the 1920s.
the OG e-bug,
Yeah.
as it were. Yeah. So he was on hand. And it was just such accepted lore in Kingston that Bill had played for the Canadians. It's on his plaque in the Sports Hall of Fame here at the arena. And no one thought to ask who did he play against? Which Hall of Famer, did he face in that game? And anything more than that? Why didn't the Canadians give him more than one game? There were so many questions that just went unasked, and I kind of kicked up the dust and and asked, and it didn't really get a good answer.
In fairness, it took you a whole lot of work to uncover what might actually have happened.
Yeah, if I'd known, I would have tracked the hours and filed for them. I, then again, I wouldn't have done my story if I was actually getting paid for it. Yeah, this was one that I did kind of on my own initiative, and how foolish was I?
Well, it does kind of beg, like, I don't know whether it's a philosophical question or
Why?
just there's why, and then there's, do you think we can ever know all there is to be known about a single day that happened 100 years ago?
Yeah, kind of the Bloomsday thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right, exactly. We're not
Yeah,
talking we're not talking Gare Joyce anymore. We're talking James Joyce.
there you go. That's the first time I've heard that. I can write a story about it. I can't say that I can write the story about it. And really, that's what I've tried to do here. It's not a correction of the record because I can't say how this story really got garbled or mistold. No one can unscramble that egg. I can make a reasonable guess how this apocryphal story gained a foothold, and I can do an awful lot of telling of the story that's verifiable about Bill, which I consider really compelling and kind of heartbreaking. I wish I could say there was a happy ending. And I think I try to get one in talking to his family about, this is your great grandfather's story. This is the family history. I can go a long way with that. And if I've done a good job with that, then I've served the family well. I don't know how well I've served readers who've stuck with the story uh, and bent their ear and stolen hours from their lives. But when I was able to tell the family members about this history that they did not know, it made me feel good about the work that I do and the time that I invested. I wrote it for me and I wrote it for them. And if other people come along for the ride, that's great.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the guy that put it on your radar was Bill's great grandson, but Bill's son is still around, and he was only 10 when his dad passed away, and in some ways, you've given him the gift of knowing more about the dad he didn't get to grow up with.
Thank God he gave his blessing, right? Because he could have made my life miserable if he wanted, right? Art took it amazingly well. Again, like I joked, I had to be the one to tell the kids Santa doesn't exist. I had to be the one to tell him that that his dad didn't play for the Canadians, but there's this rich hockey history that he knew nothing about. Bill was property of two NHL teams that ceased to exist anymore. Bill did play against Hall of Famers and played with Hall of Famers. He had a rich hockey life and away from the arena that was cut far too short. He's 93, and I felt like I was talking to the 10-year-old, sitting in the pews at his father's funeral. He never saw his father play the game. I was able to create a world on the page where his father played for him.
Well, you've done that for all of us as well. Gare Joyce, great stories. Thank you so much for sharing them with us.
Okay, well, I hope other people make it through it.
Gare Joyce is a writer for the Kingston Whig-Standard newspaper. His three-part series on the life and times of hockey player Bill Taugher appears in the Kingston Whig-Standard. We have a link to the digital versions of those and some pictures as well at ncpr.org/northwards. And Ethan, as the hockey historian you are, did you ever know about that story?
No, I'd never heard that story, and I loved listening to Gare talk about how he got to bring this story to the family members, and how he said that. My favorite part of the whole thing is him talking about how he's not sure if he can tell the definitive story about Taugher, but he can tell a story and try to wrap it up in a way that makes sense and gives the family some closure. He's talking about talking to Taugher's son, who never got to see him play hockey. What did he say? Something along the lines of it was this guy was 10 years old again, even though he's in his 90s now, and getting to relive his dad's one moment in the spotlight. I thought that was really touching. Yeah.
Well, and amazing to think that it took the curiosity of a reporter who just happened to hear of the guy to go down the rabbit hole and tell this really long and textured history of a guy who passed away in 1943, and it's a story that the guy's 93-year-old son had really never heard in its entirety, and what a gift he was able to give to the family. And we've talked about this on the show before, but it really does get to the heart of why oral history is so important, and just asking the questions of people who came before you. Although in this case, it's kind of the opposite. This is Bill Taugher's 93-year-old son.
Yeah, right.
Never knew the stories, and so it took somebody today to go back and dig it up. And
I also love this notion that you never know when an idea is going to drop into your head, fall into your lap, and what strange journey you'll go on trying to uncover a little bit more of it. I think that's really cool. It's just really fun to listen to this guy talk about his process.
Ethan Chanty, here's some more great stories in 2026, right?
I guess if we have to.
Oh, thanks. Buzzkill there. All right. So this is the last show of 2025.
Right.
Who's been producing this show the whole year round?
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. Bill Hanel is our digital guy. Caitlin Kelly handles social media, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. To learn more about this show, listen to past conversations, and to make a financial contribution, head to ncpr.org/northwards. This is NCPR North Country Public Radio.
Happy New Year, everybody.